On today's show, do the Bears have what it takes to take down the Phantoms on Wednesday and move on to the Atlantic Division Final? We'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Game off, we got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with your friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the Hershey Bears as they're making their push for another Calder Cup. Listen, the Capitals got eliminated in 4 games, but there's still a lot to cheer about. As in my opinion, I think the Hershey Bears have what it takes. We'll talk about game 1. And then in the second segment, we'll talk about game 2 and what things went right and wrong in that game. And then in the final segment, we'll talk about what the Bears need to do to seal up the win and move on to the next round. But in today's episode, we have Corey Swartz of HBH Nation and Richard Blosser from the Grit and Barrett podcast. Guys, welcome to the show. Talking about the Bears here. It's an interesting thing. You know, you take a look at the Capitals. I, as a guy that hosts the show on the Capitals, was pretty excited that this team found a way to back into victory as they had to win the last 3 games of the season to get it done, and was greatly disappointed. Well, when that hope got fanned out in 4 games, but there still is hope if you are a fan of a Capitals team in the Hershey Bears, the AHL affiliate, as they have taken down the first 2 games of the playoff series. Corey, talk to us a little bit about the Bears and how they're getting it done. And do you ultimately think they have what it takes to seal it up in game number 3?
Yeah, definitely. So the Bears have a pretty steady diet. They've benefited immensely, in a sense, from the Capitals' early departure, and that they've gotten all their players back. So it was 6 guys that kind of infused their lineup with a lot of both youth and experience. Hendrix Lapierre has come up huge in the first 2 games. He has goals in both games, as well as an assist, I believe. He's kind of been a key cog on the newly formed first line with Joe Snively and Ethen Frank. I do think the Bears have what it takes to beat the Phantoms on the road. They were pretty good in Allentown during the regular season. The Phantoms, they're a scrappy team. They are certainly not to be underestimated. They gave the Bears fits at times, just by playing a very gritty style, very rough in your face, try to put all the pucks at the net type of style of play here. So I do think the Bears have what it takes to finish this game off in 3, taking care of business on home ice at Giant Center. An emphatic Game 2 victory, I think, was a real tide turner in a lot of ways. So I've liked what the Bears have shown so far. There's some things that they can improve and tighten up on, certainly. But as far as, showings coming after, a week and a half off of game action when they were away with that first-round bye, you have to, tip your cap to Todd Nelson and his coaching staff for keeping these guys ready and, rumbling right out of the gate here against a, like I said, fairly upstart Lehigh Valley team.
You take a look at it in game 1, the Bears down the Phantoms in game 1 by a score of 1-2, and it was a tight game. And it's interesting as the Bears were outshot by the Phantoms 31-28. And what we know is now that the Hershey Bears have Hendrix Lapierre on the team and Ivan Mirshnyshenko. Richard, talk to me about the additions of Hendrix Lapierre and Ivan Mirshnyshenko, and what kind of boost has that given the team?
it's given them a really big boost. A team that's already loaded on the forward side. If you just had in a Ethen Frank, Henrik Rybinski, a really good bottom six of forwards that can step up in the absence of a Hendrix and Miro. Now you have these players come back is pretty much adding more weapons to a battle cruiser that just really strengthens this lineup, especially when Lapierre came in on that first goal on game one. That just really shook away a lot of nervous energy that some Bears fans like myself had in game one. How's the week off going to be? The Phantoms have played 2 games already and have already won. How are they going to be? And to just have Lapierre and Miro, that's what I call them, just to come in and say, we're good. We're going to come in and make an immediate impact was what Bears fans were expecting them to be plug and play, come back in and take this cup run seriously, because Todd Nelson said in one of his interviews the previous week, he's been with players that were with Oklahoma City who got sent down from Edmonton and just didn't take a Calder Cup playoff series seriously. They were just down there for a couple games. We'll be gone. We'll be going golfing. Oklahoma City didn't matter. And it's good to see these players come down from Washington. And a lot of these guys were with the team last year, is taking this run seriously and realize just how good and how special this team could potentially be.
Yeah, and you take a look at the offense, like you talked about Hendrix Lapierre, which we know is a part of the future of the Washington Capitals, but it's really great that he's able to help out the AHL affiliate Hershey Bears. He was the one that got the Bears on the board first, and Henrik Rybinski scores in the second period. So it was good that the Bears were able to get that offensive going, and in game one in particular, Hunter Shepard was huge, and in a lot of ways won it for the Bears, saving 30 of 31. A big win, much to work on, said Coach Todd Nelson. The Phantoms were tough despite the box score in the game early on. Nearly had to go to overtime. Was that your assessment on it, Corey? Did it almost seem like the game was going to get away from them in the first game?
Yes and no. There were some dangerous times, especially in the third period, where the Bears were kind of defending, and they let the Phantoms kind of get back into the game with a Tanner Lazinski goal late. There was enough time for the Phantoms to push, but conversely, I do believe, in my opinion, the Bears had some grade A chances that get overlooked in this game on the box score. Certainly, Hendrix Lapierre could have easily had 3 goals in this game. There was he had a breakaway shortly after his first goal there, as well as one that sticks out in my mind was a lead pass that was just out of his reach on what would have been a tap in past Cal Peterson. So, I do think that, late the Bears kind of took their foot off the pedal offensively a little bit, but they've shown this great characteristic defensively that they've, between Shepard's great play, they had that championship experience, most of them do. And the others, they've had this great regular season. As a fan, I was worried, but not scared, if that makes sense. The Bears have that kind of championship moxie that, you felt that they were probably going to keep the puck out of the net despite all of what Lehigh Valley's been through. It didn't worry me 2 tons there, I would say. But, certainly there was a lot to improve on there and a lot to capitalize on, certainly. And, it certainly was a different game in game 1 compared to game 2, much more tight checking, no power plays for either team, which is a rare oddity for the Bears. I think one of the first times that's ever happened in Hershey history. So a lot of oddities, but I think the Bears played a pretty good game, and they took advantage where they could, and were able to hold off the Phantoms. So I liked what they brought in game 1. It had a lot of room for improvement, but I think that, given all the circumstances of, as Richard said, Lehigh Valley winning a couple of games earlier, being the fresher of the 2 teams, the time off, all that kind of combines to me to, say the Bears kind of controlled the game very well despite the circumstances.
Yeah, I wasn't able to be at the game. I watched it on AHL TV. We were talking about that before the interview here. If you can't make it to a game, the quality is next to NHL quality. I'm going to go ahead and say the production is top notch. But one of the things that I noticed is the Bears slammed the door on the Phantoms as their experience came into focus. And I think that there was a bit of rust at first in game one that was apparent. And the other thing that I noticed was that Riley Sutter and, of course, Vinnie Iorio were missing from the game. Richard, talk to us about that. How big of an impact was Riley Sutter and Vinnie Iorio missing from the game? How did that affect the Bears' play?
The absence of Riley Sutter is very much missed in two places. First is the faceoff circle, which the HL does not keep stats of to the extent that the NHL does. But Riley is a quality guy who will get you faceoff wins, especially in the defensive zone. And secondly, on the penalty kill, which like Beck Mallenstein is a pillar on that penalty kill, where he'll be a guy who will play up in the top part of the square or diamond setup. He'll be the guy defending the point. He'll easily get in front of any shot, and he'll get sticks in lanes and just break up any type of scoring attempt. So Riley Sutter's absence has been missed, but you've seen guys like Matt Strome and Bogdan Trineyev step up in his absence. Not Trineyev so much on the penalty kill, but just those guys who are going to be there in the penalty kill to step in the absence of Riley. Vinnie is another weapon that is missed. He's taking strides this year in his defensive game, learning when to jump into a play and winning to back off, especially when he's paired with a veteran like a Dylan McElrath or Aaron Ness. That allows him to jump up on plays and have a veteran defenseman back in case he ends up getting caught pinching on a play. But if or when Vinnie gets healthy, he'll be an added addition as well. But the Bears do have enough defensemen that Vinnie's absence isn't too sorely missed. I mean, it is missed, but not to a great extent. But Riley's is definitely the bigger of the two.
And taking a look at it, I think that the score could have been more in the Bears' favor. The score could have been much better, except there was a lot of missed opportunities in the third period is what comes into mind. The fourth line had a strong showing as well, with all three forwards combining for Hershey's second goal. Talk to me about that, Corey, about how the Hershey Bears are getting it done and how they're getting it done with not necessarily the first line players, but how they're getting it done on the fourth line as well.
It's a team effort. And, kind of to Richard's point there, I do think that there's something to be said about that fourth line that chipped in, all three players getting points on both those goals they scored in the first two games, where, it's not Riley Sutter, but it's guys that have kind of been raised by Riley Sutter, right? Like Matt Strome was kind of Riley's right-hand man on the penalty kill, one of the first couple of guys. You heard him talk post-game about how much he loves playing on the penalty kill and, getting those shot blocks and zone clears and, firing up his teammates type of thing. But, you look at Rybinski and Trineyev, who are two guys that, in my opinion, really stepped up and to fill the void left by Sutter, not only on the penalty kill, but, they've had a knack. They've kind of been snake-bitten players in the regular season. I would say that they've generated some great looks and not necessarily gotten rewarded for it. So, they kind of had this great combination. You saw it in both games where they have a lot of skill. They're talented guys, but they also have an element of physicality, size that I think is underrated. You saw Matt Strome launch a guy out of the way before the goal in game two. Trineyev's got a lot of skill. Rybinski's got a lot of skill. All three guys are, pretty nice blend of skill and strength there in a lot of ways. And they just powered their way to two goals there. I mean, Rybinski getting a nice deflection in game two. The game one goal was a brilliant, chance from in tight generated by, again, their physical play. So I think they're kind of up and comers here. Like Richard said, it's not Riley. Nobody's replacing Riley Sutter in any way, but these guys have kind of been raised by him in a lot of ways in that bottom six capacity. And I love what they brought to the table in his absence here. It almost makes it hard when he is healthy to pick one of those guys that's going to come out of the lineup for him necessarily. So I love to see it. You love to see some of these guys taking these strides early some early storylines to follow in the first round.
Yeah, it's encouraging to see, and it's got to be kind of exciting as a Bears fan to watch the team, and it's not just, the top line guys getting it done. You can get it scoring from the first line all the way to the fourth line. I think the Capitals could take a page from the Hershey Bears there. All right, so coming up here straight ahead, we will talk about game number 2 and what was working for the Bears and what needed to be cleaned up before game number 3. We'll discuss straight ahead. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with your friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Hershey Bears, well, they played well as they got the win in game number 1, but they weren't done there as they won by a larger margin in game number 2. Just a sign of dominance by the Bears. The Hershey Bears take down the Phantoms by a score of 5-1. In my notes, I said that's more like it. I like a decisive victory, but yet again, Hershey was greatly outshot 31-16. Ethen Frank, huge. And, I thought that he should have gotten a look on the Capitals as the Capitals were struggling at points during the season. I thought, hey, the fastest skater out there, I think that, oftentimes the Capitals have been said are a slow team. I think they could use a player like Ethen Frank, but he is killing it for the Bears as he gets 2 goals in the first. Richard, talk to me about Ethen Frank and how clutch he has been for the Bears.
That first goal by Ethen Frank in the first period was absolutely incredible as he takes a partial breakaway, skates in on the blue line, cuts in on Cal Peterson and backhands it right on over his glove for the first goal. And to let Caps fans know they're listening to this, the entire 5 minutes beforehand was all Phantoms. They came out flying, hard checking, throwing everything at Hunter Shepard. They said, we're not going to let the Bears get the early jump on us, and really tried to set the tone in that first 4 or 5 minutes. And then the first chance that Ethen gets just breaks in, cuts, backhands, and scores, just completely wipes out all the good work that the Phantoms did. So that was a really gut punch of a goal for the Phantoms to give up. But Ethen getting the first 2 goals really set the tone of saying that this Bears team is the better 5-on-5 team among both of them, and said that we're better than you, and we know it in a way. Ethen not only used his speed, but also cleaned up the garbage in front of the goal, and that's how he got his second, thanks to a nice feed from Joe Snively. Very similar as to how Mike Vecchione scored the cup winner last June to make it 2-0. So Ethen took it a lot upon himself to really say, get on my back. I'm going to help us win game 2. And that's exactly what Ethen did. And I really hope he does get an extended look for the Capitals in September.
I was a bit surprised why that wasn't the case. I know they saw different players. We saw Pierre Dubé and that kind of thing, but I would like to see Ethen Frank just based on his speed and his skill set. I definitely think it's worth a look, but they got a lot of scoring. Rybinski and Limoges in the second, and Hendrix Lapierre in the second, and Hunter Shepard, Shep Daddy, huge, came up clutch again, saving 30 of 31. And, Joe Snively is another guy that has had a cup of coffee with the Capitals, was the third star with 2 assists in the game. Corey, as we take a look at game number 2, what really stood out as far as offense? Was it Ethen Frank's 2 goals, or what was really, your big takeaway from game 2? What sealed it for the Bears?
I think it was just how well-rounded they were. I mean, you look at the lines between games 1 and 2, there was the same personnel, but a couple of different combinations there, including that top line was a new formation of, Snively, Frank, and Hendrix Lapierre there. I think that line, really, you always kind of question the wisdom of changing lines after a win, right? You're always kind of like, well, if it's not broken, why fix it? But, I think it kind of is a credit to Todd Nelson and his coaching staff to identify, hey, this worked okay, but let's, swap some pieces around here, see how it goes. And it paid immediate dividends. I mean, we saw, all 3 of those players get on the score sheet. Snively with a pair of assists, Frank with a 3-point game. Just lots to like there. But even beyond what was on the score sheet, I think there's some lines that I think, are due for a breakout. In my mind, the line with Ivan Miroshnichenko was one of them that, he had a couple of great looks, was absolutely snake bitten in game 2. His line, I think it's him and Mike Vecchione and Pierre Dubé, if I'm not mistaken, really, I think had their own moments where they shined in their own way too. So I really liked, the Bears are a 4-pronged attack. Obviously, they were outshot in this game. And Todd Nelson did address that after the game, saying that they were a little bit more selective with their shots, whereas it's, part of Lehigh Valley's game plan to just kind of throw everything to the net, to the kitchen sink, and, see what sticks. And that's a lot of their game plan. The Phantoms are like that. Nelson was not concerned about it. So, that's the positive takeaway there. I think they stuck to their game plan. We saw some perfect execution. The Alex Limoges power play goal immediately comes to mind in terms of absolute perfection, in terms of executing on a power play, certainly. So I really liked what they brought. I think offensively, it's more of just capitalizing on what they can do here. They were 1 for 7 on the power play. That kind of stands out as a little bit of a sore thumb in the sense that, if they had capitalized 2 more times, this is a laugher in some ways. The Bears would have had a much larger margin of victory here. So I think it's, cleaning up some of that execution, getting some better looks, not allowing the Phantoms to have any momentum on the power play as they did in times on Hershey's power plays is huge and a big key in game 3. But overall, you can't be dissatisfied with a 5-1 margin of victory. I think the Bears kind of flexed their muscles at times across the ice here, both defensively, offensively, and you got to just tip your hat to Hunter Shepard with back-to-back 30-save efforts and only 2 goals against in that span. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah, I was actually lucky enough to see Hunter Shepard play at UMD. He was quite the guy back then and still is now. And, my biggest thing is I think that, he could have a spot on the Capitals, if it came to that, but that'll be a discussion for a later podcast. But the Hershey Bears head coach, too, he wasn't too concerned about the Bears not getting enough shots. He felt like the Bears were getting more quality shots where it seemed like the Phantoms were trying to throw the kitchen sink at Hunter Shepard there. Was that your assessment, Richard?
Yeah, I kind of felt that it was more of desperation sitting in with the Phantoms, realizing that they're looking at a 2-0 deficit in the series, and it's just time to start throwing everything. And the way the Phantoms, play is a very, like you said, a very in your face. But one thing they like to do is that they try to get their opponents razzled, get them upset, get under their skin, and cause them to take penalties. That was one of their big game plans going into game 2 against the Baby Penguins. And thus it cost the Penguins a series. So, yeah, I kind of felt that with the Phantoms, because the Phantoms, they are a team that have some prospects, some veterans, but I never really felt like knew exactly what they are. Like, are they a team that's going to beat you in a low scoring type of game? Is it a team that's just going to throw everything at you? Like you said, Dan, it's just a team that's really lacking in identity. So yeah, it felt like they were throwing everything at Hunter, but it was more desperation setting in for a team that's about to go down big in the series.
So, Corey, as we take a look at it, the game Wednesday night goes to Allentown at PPL Center, where the Bears take on the Phantoms. Is there anything to there being home turf advantage or home ice, if you will, or do you think that the Bears will still be able to pick up a big dub?
Concerned about the Bears' ability to win in Lehigh Valley. We saw the Bears play there 6 times in the regular season. Aside from, maybe a couple of shootouts that didn't go their way, the Bears were, pretty good at times at taking wins out of PPL Center, and they historically have been pretty good there in recent time. My only concern is that the Phantoms, could build some momentum before a home crowd. I mean, they weren't stellar on home ice. I was looking at the stats the other day. They were, below 500 on home ice during the regular season. But my big concern with the Phantoms is that, as we saw in game 2, Richard alluded to, Ethen Frank's first goal kind of taking the wind out of their sails, is achieving that in game 3 early, especially, the Phantoms will be spurred on by their home crowd. They have this gritty style, it's fitting being a Flyers affiliate that they're very gritty, along the boards. They play heavy physically, and they have this style where they absolutely love to get the puck low in the slot and just cause mass chaos. They scored both their goals in this series so far in that fashion. In the Wilkes-Barre series, it was instrumental in kind of throwing the Penguins off their game, drawing penalties. It was a result of, how they came back in that game 2 against Wilkes-Barre, right? So they capitalized on both penalties in a 5-on-3 situation. Nelson's kind of mentioned a couple of times that they have to find ways to limit that and limit, the momentum that the Phantoms are able to generate off those types of plays there defensively. And, I think he described it as, killing it, so to speak, offensively. So those are kind of my big keys, is that the Bears can kind of eliminate that, play their game. I mean, with all due respect to the Phantoms, I think the Bears have kind of had their number so far in this series, with getting some big saves from Shepard, kind of denying them some of these would-be game-changing goals. I mean, you look back at game 2 and that penalty shot that often gets overlooked as a byline on the score sheet, with Hunter Shepard stopping, just Bobby Brink, guy that spent most of the season up with the Philadelphia Flyers. So, and is going to be up with the Flyers again, most likely next season. It's a very big up-and-comer type of thing. So it's some very underrated aspects of the Bears game here that I think they just need to continue to play Hershey Bears hockey. As they said last season, if they play Hershey Bears hockey, they are going to be good for trying to get wins here most times when they stick to that style.
Yeah, they've been most impressive so far. Part of me was thinking, I'm like, can they get that lucky again? And it's not really luck. I understand it's skill, but for them to play such lights out hockey again, after winning the Calder Cup last year, for them to be, on the verge of doing it again, I guess I'm going to say it's quite something. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about game 3. Do the Bears have what it takes to slam the doors on the Phantoms? We'll discuss straight ahead. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's winner take all in the NBA, NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home big wins of your own. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, or more. And guys, oftentimes you're watching a game at home. Say it's an NHL playoff game or it's a Nationals game, and maybe you're not that into it. Open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, the game is that much more exciting. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode, we are joined by Corey Swartz of HBH Nation and Richard Blosser of the Grit and Barrett podcast. Guys, let's talk about Game 3 Wednesday evening. There's a lot at stake. They could be moving on to the next round, and I think ultimately that is what we're hoping for. So just, taking a look at the first couple games and what I watched and what I noticed is they need more from the power play. The Bears looked out of sync and even led to more scoring opportunities for the Phantoms. Richard, what are your keys for success in game number 3?
It is doing what we did in the first 2 games, and that is striking first. Doesn't have to be in the first 5 minutes, which is what we've done, but getting that first goal will be very, very important. It can come from anyone. It could be the top line of Ethen or Lapierre once again, or maybe Matthew Phillips or Pietrek Dubé finds their scoring touch, or maybe Bogdan Trineyev gets one as well. I'll take anyone. But it's going to be very important for the Bears to get that first goal and take the crowd out of it there at the PPL Center, because the Bears have all the tools to win Game 3 and end this series on a Wednesday. But something I've said on the podcast all season is that the only team that can really beat the Hershey Bears is the Hershey Bears. And I hope they don't get in their own head too much, that they grip the sticks a little tight. A lot of unenforced errors happen on a power play and could lead to shorthanded opportunity or just have an off night. And sure, that tends to happen in the playoffs. And in a 7-game series, you can afford to have an off night a bit, unless you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, but that's a different story altogether. But in a 5-game set, you can't really have too much of an off night. Like you've got to be on. And for the Bears, I mean, they have 3 chances to win one. I'd like to see them do it Wednesday. They were able to do it in Hartford last year, where they were able to go to the XL Center and close things out on a Wednesday night. I am cautiously optimistic that they can do this, but scoring first is going to be the key for the Bears.
All right, Corey, let's talk about the roster and who's going to be out there. Do you see them making any changes? If I was the coach, I'd keep rolling with what works. Hunter Shepard in net. I know that there's Clay Stevenson and some black aces on the team in net as well. Talk to us a little bit about that. Hunter Shepard and Clay Stevenson. It's a luxury of wealth for the Bears and the Capitals, really, that they have some, really outstanding netminders. Clay Stevenson and Hunter Shepard have kind of vacillated between number 1 and number 2 in all of the AHL. Talk to us a little bit about the goaltending situation. Of course, Hunter Shepard, or what is the status of Clay Stevenson based on the fact that they both had really good seasons?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that this is Hunter Shepard's job to have no matter what at this point. It's kind of I hate to say it's kind of fallen into a similar situation to what we saw last season between Shepard and Zach Fucale. Certainly Clay Stevenson had an outstanding season. He's been great. He will be the guy. We kind of alluded to it earlier. If the Capitals are able to make room for Shepard next season, it's very much Clay Stevenson's crease. Saw Mitch Gibson sporting a new Hershey Bears looking mask at practice earlier this week. So it's, maybe a sign that, early that, not only is Gibson hopefully going to be re-signed as a restricted free agent, but, he's a guy that's kind of on trajectory like Stevenson to, potentially be part of the Bears rotation, whether it be this coming season, next fall, or, the season afterwards. He's very much a guy that seems to be in their future plans. But make no mistake at this point, Hunter Shepard was in an upper echelon of goaltenders. Him and Clay Stevenson were number 1 and 2, but Shepard is he has almost an aura about him where, especially as he warms up towards the playoffs here late in the regular season, he's just the kind of guy that, he keeps this team in games, even if they're not playing at their offensive best. You saw him make a couple of great saves, including that penalty shot. No way is he going to be pulled out of the net for any reason in this game. It is his job. I would say even if he has an off game and they have to, come back on Saturday for another game, he's going to get a chance to go right back in there. Truly, it's, a luxury of, or I should say an embarrassment of riches in some ways that, you're saying that about goaltenders number 1 and 2, but it's, if you're Lehigh Valley, there's no easy options here. Even if they were to pull Hunter Shepard from the net, you're still facing Clay Stevenson, who had, at least one shutout that I can think of against Lehigh Valley this season. Him and Shepard obviously combined for 12 over the course of the regular season. So, I don't foresee any lineup changes for the Bears unless, Riley Sutter and Vincent Iorio were able to go. But even so, they can afford to take their time and let these guys, really get back to as close to 100% as they can get. Neither player, from what I could tell, was, skated with the main group in practice, at least last week. It doesn't seem, although they're skating in general, they're not, skating with the guys, certainly not in contact jerseys. Just not a suspicion they'd be back in time for game 3. Maybe we'll see it down the road, but you're starting to kind of lock into this regular group. And given the success of the fourth line, and there's some lines that have been offensively potent, it's almost again an embarrassment of riches in a sense that they don't have to worry about necessarily banking their entire postseason on those guys coming back. So I don't foresee any lineup changes unless someone's banged up. Garrett Rowe is kind of an extra skater, a healthy extra skater right now. Some other guys like Jake Massey's healthy. If Iorio goes, oh no, that means Logan Day comes out of the lineup, a guy that made some great plays for the Bears in the playoffs last season. So again, just they went from pretty threadbare towards the end of the season to just having this great core group, and everybody's willing to step up. Even if someone, Jake Massey comes in, he's been stellar this season. Dmitry Osipov is there. He's been stellar when called upon as well this season. So truly nothing to be worried about, but I foresee the same group we've seen the first 2 games go in game 3 on Wednesday.
So I'll ask both of you guys this question. Corey, I'll start real quick. In game 3, who's going to win? Is it going to be the Bears or the Phantoms?
Well, it's funny you mentioned, because I was the only one on my podcast to predict this game going more than 3 games. So I'll buck that trend and say I think the Bears got this. I was worried about the Bears, how they deal with the Phantoms' early push. The Phantoms are a pretty upstart team. They, like I said, that physical game, and they're throwing pucks to the net and getting some goals off of some jam plays there. Did concern me in a short series like this to see if the Bears would be able to counter, and they did. So I think the momentum is firmly in Hershey's side. We saw the Phantoms kind of have a little bit of a meltdown at the end of game 2, where there was that big scrum that doled out all those penalties, misconducts aplenty for everybody on the ice. It was a real product of some of the Phantoms' frustration. So if I'm the Bears, I'd say keep playing that style. Let's keep the Phantoms frustrated. Don't give them anything to build upon. As Richard said earlier, in the early stages of this game, if you're able to do those things and, again, play Hershey Bears hockey, connect a few times on the power play, like that brilliant Limoges goal, I think this should be a Bears win, honestly.
All right, Richard, I'll ask you the same question. Who is going to win Wednesday evening?
Well, I said on my show, Bears in 4, because I thought Cal Peterson could steal a game at Giants Center or at PPL. And after the first 2 games, from what I've seen on some Phantoms groups, Cal Peterson ain't him, as the kids like to say. But I think this game 3 is going to be a knockdown, drag out fight. I don't think there's going to be another blowout like in game 2, but I could see the Bears taking this in a low scoring game. Another 2-1 affair is very much possible, or 3-2 type of game. Maybe they get an empty netter and make it 4-2, but the Bears are definitely capable of taking game 3, and I hope they do end it on Wednesday night.
All right, guys, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals. Corey, talk to us about your written work. Oftentimes, I can't watch all the Bears games, but oftentimes I will go to your WordPress page, HBH Nation, and there's always a wealth of knowledge about the Hershey Bears. Guys, check it out. But you also mentioned that, so give a shout out to that. And also you mentioned a podcast. Where can we find you online?
Yeah, so it's a lot of places. If you follow at HBH Nation blog on Twitter, you'll see everything. A lot of my written work goes between there and the Calder Times, and as well as our podcast, which is the Calder's Calling podcast there. So a couple of different resources, but if you follow that page on Twitter, you'll see everything about the posts. We love to do in-game updates with highlights, clips, analysis, and all that fun stuff there as games go on. You follow me for my personal ramblings at CSWA11. I do a lot of other things. Like I did cover some of the Phantoms series preceding this one against Wilkes-Barre. Lots of my other thoughts on things like that. And, lots of Bears stuff goes over there as well. So at HBH Nation blog, it's there on Facebook and on Instagram as well for some of our great photos from our photographer, Carl Minieri, who does a fantastic job. My words get to wrap around his great pictures. So I always like to give him shout outs.
Sure do appreciate your work. And Richard, the Grit and Barrett podcast, a go-to podcast for Bears fans, or say you're a Capitals fan that wants to be in the know when it comes to the Bears. Where can we find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at rbloss64, in Nintendo Ultra 64. And if you want to follow the podcast, Grit and Barrett P1 on Twitter. On my own one is where I post in-game updates and funny GIFs as well during the NHL season, especially during the playoffs as well. You can check out the show on the Hockey Podcast Network as well, or wherever you get your podcasts. I also do some recap work for 717 Sports Media. I've been doing a lot of recaps and stuff for them this season as well. So if Capitals fans want to check out, sort of a running commentary of the Bears there this season, you can check me out there at 717sportsmedia.com. But of course, the Grit and Bear It podcast, new episodes every week. We'll be covering all the Bears playoff action, however long it goes.
All right, Richard and Corey, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, and maybe we could talk again once it goes to the next round, kind of touch base, and I'll get your guys' thoughts as long as you're both available, and it would be very informative for Capitals listeners.
Absolutely.
All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.